Welcome, everybody, to the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And today, guys, we have another football-filled podcast for you guys. We're making it a little interesting today. We have 4 weeks left in the NFL season, and in the middle of this podcast, we are going to get into pretenders or contenders with all 8 of the NFL's first-place teams, and that includes the NFC East. So we'll get into that in the middle. We will also start the podcast by doing our typical review of Week 13. We are going to only be doing 2 games this week, 2 games instead of the usual 4, because we want to get into pretenders and contenders. And then we will do our normal preview of 1 game each. We have those set up for you already. And then we will end the podcast with a little college football rankings talk. We are 1 week away from the big championship games in each conference, really the games that will determine who's in the Final Four. It's rivalry week, but a lot of the rivalries are very lopsided. So we're not going to go game by game. We're going to talk about the rankings and give our opinions on certain teams in the rankings. But Jared, let's start the podcast by doing our usual thing. We have our little topics that we want to discuss for about a minute or less. I will start here. We have a big speaking of college football and college football rankings, we have the best Pac-12 team playing in a big rivalry game this weekend. And it's also a rivalry game between Jared and I a little bit. It's USC and UCLA. I'm a fan of the UCLA Bruins. Jared is a fan of the USC Trojans. Now, USC is 5-0 this year. Yes, they had a little hiccup against U of A and barely beat them. But besides that, they've had a lot of good wins this season. And they've showed that their talent is on par with some of the best college football teams in the nation. But I just want to pump the brakes on USC a little bit because, again, a lot of these games haven't been blowouts per se, like an Alabama or Clemson or an Ohio State. And the interesting thing about UCLA is all you've heard about UCLA last few years is Chip Kelly's not working out. UCLA sucks. I'll say this year. UCLA may be 3-2 in a 5-game season, but they're the best 3-2 team in a 5-game season. Because, yes, first game of the season, not very good, but they were close. They were very, very close to one possession away from winning that game. And if they had any confidence and any sort of defense at the end of that game, they would have won that game. The rest of the games they've won, and then they had the Oregon game, which was obviously a game against a ranked opponent. UCLA should have won that game, and it was really Chip Kelly's fault for some decision making, literally on play calls. His talent won that game essentially, but he made some bad calls. So I'm just saying, coming into this game, UCLA is better than you guys think. And I really think we're looking at an upset here from the Bruins. They've played good all season. It seems to be a culture change at UCLA. It seems to be Chip Kelly finally working out a little bit. And I'm going to go with the Bruins in an empty Rose Bowl against USC.
Yeah, you don't sound too confident there, and obviously I'm going with my choice.
Yeah, I'm very
and I'll make this really. I'll make this really sweet. And listen, you named Chip Kelly as the main reasons why UCLA has lost so far, and maybe why they're not as good. And I'm going to continue with that. And he is the reason why this team is not better, right? Listen, 10 years ago, Chip Kelly was the new, like, not young coach, but like the innovative guy bringing in all of this kind of new wave offense into college football and eventually into the NFL that we had just never seen before, right? And it took defenses and coordinators and coaches time to adjust. Well, guess what? Everyone is caught up now. Everyone is running the spread offense. Everyone is running a version of what Chip Kelly does. So Chip Kelly doesn't get the same athletes and the same recruits that he used to get when he was at Oregon, right? Basically, Chip Kelly, I think he's kind of hindering himself. And you're right. He makes some coaching errors, whether it's decision making, clock management. I don't know what's going on in his head, but I think he himself is hindering this team from progressing and continuing to get better. So for that reason alone, I think talent-wise, UCLA, yes, can match up with USC. But from a head coaching standpoint, I don't trust that Chip Kelly can get the job done. So I'm going to take USC, not necessarily because they're undefeated, but because they're going up against Chip Kelly. And I think some way, somehow, whether it's, like I said, a clock management issue. I think he's going to do something that will end up hurting his team in the end, and it'll give USC the win.
Hey, Jared, that's what we got to be fans of the teams, right? And I think UCLA wins because I'm hopeful that those mistakes don't happen. And USC has shown that they haven't lost a game this season. We will get into the rankings to possibly talk about USC a little later. Has a little reality TV to discuss right now on the Cover 2 podcast.
Yeah. For those of you who watch the show Below Deck on Bravo, and Nick, I know you do. I don't, but I've heard of it. UNLV quarterback Max Gilliam appeared on the show, and he had a little bit of fun. Let's just say that. There was a moment on the show that was aired where he was eating sushi off of a naked model. Now, he has come out since, and I believe yesterday, apologized for this incident, saying that it was, not his typical character, and that's not who he is as a person. Sorry, Nick, but this dude is the starting quarterback at a Division I college, and he just went on a, reality TV show and ate sushi off of a naked model. What is wrong with that? What guy in this world, his age in college, starting quarterback, would not do the same thing? Like, what is he apologizing for? I don't know, man. Like, if this is a COVID issue, like if the team was concerned or if the coaches were upset or something like that, because he was potentially putting him putting himself in a position to contract the virus, then I can see where people can be mad at him. But from what I'm reading, he is literally apologizing for eating sushi off of a naked model. What's the problem here? I really don't. Like, can you help me out with this? Because this guy's living the dream right now. And now he gets to go on TV. He gets to hang out with, models. And he's apologizing for that? I'm stumped. I don't know what to say.
Jared, let's just say this, okay? In all honesty, you're telling me that just because this guy was filmed on reality TV, just because his parents or whatever have enough money to pay for these yachts, that means that we call this kid out when probably during a non-COVID year, realistically, this is happening every single week, maybe 2 times a week on every college campus. Like, realistically, right? Maybe they're not all models that you're eating sushi off of, but still, this is guys, they're college students. What are we talking about this? Why are we trying to cancel this kid? First of all, why are we trying to cancel him? He plays at UNLV. Who cares? I can get if this is Mac Jones at Alabama or Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, and we've seen this with Baker Mayfield and Johnny Manziel. When there's questionable character, it gets brought up because these guys are high profile. What is Mac? Like, who?
Never heard?
How many college football players have also been on reality TV and maybe done some sketchy stuff, but just because they weren't a quarter, like, this is such a non-story, it doesn't matter. But somehow, Jared, we're talking about it on the Cover 2 podcast, so I guess it is a story. But hey, this happens. It's a college thing. I know it happened like on a boat on TV, but still, like, college students do way stupider things every single week on campus. To be honest, COVID or not COVID. So I'm just saying this is not a big deal, and I don't blame the kid for having the opportunity to do that because I would have done the same thing. I think my brother would have done the same thing. Jared, I think you would have done the same thing. There's plenty of other people we know would have done the same thing, especially when we were in college too. So not a story at all. But speaking of college, Jared, let's just switch topics really quickly. The Jets, because essentially we're talking about a college team here. We're going to get into our review here, and you guys all know what we're going to talk about here. And that's the Jets' inability to stop a Hail Mary and to run cover 0 on a Hail Mary and let Henry Ruggs get behind Diva. Jared, just discuss this, please, because now we have Greg Williams has been fired, which is great. Which not great, but great for our podcast. And we now have the coach fired for this to add fuel to the story. But go into the details of why it's a bad idea or a good idea in your opinion to run that type of play on the Hail Mary. Go through it. You are kind of more you played football more longer than me. Explain why this is such a bad idea, or it was actually a good idea that went wrong.
Yeah, listen, first of all, Greg Williams got himself fired. Okay. This was a mess from the beginning. the fact that the Jets even hired Greg Williams to be their defensive coordinator should say something in itself. I mean, Greg Williams, this is the same guy that I believe back in 2011, 2012 was the defensive coordinator with the New Orleans Saints and got busted for Bountygate, right? For trying to take out Brett Favre and a bunch of other quarterbacks throughout that season, right? So this is that same dude. He's been bounced around. He's been in Cleveland. He's been all over the place. And so, yes, he may have a lot of experience and he may, have the 30-year coaching resume, but that doesn't mean that he's a good coach. That doesn't mean that he deserves to be in the league, right? So, listen, the Jets, you want to know one of the reasons why the Jets don't have a win? It's not only because they have a lack of talent, but you have Adam Gase as your head coach, right? Who is supposedly an offensive guru, but yet they are like last in points scored. And then you pair him with Greg Williams, the defensive coordinator, who wants to be like a version of Rex Ryan and just blitz all over the place. And blitzing obviously is what he does best, or what he tries to do best, and is exactly what they did on that final play. Listen, in my entire playing career, in my entire life of watching football, when it comes down to a Hail Mary last second, situation like that, the fact that you basically blitzed the house, an all-out blitz, and left 3 defenders to cover 3 guys is he should have. I don't even know how they waited to fire him like yesterday on Monday. We're recording this is Tuesday morning. He should have been fired before he left the field on Sunday, right? I don't. And here's the other thing: Henry Ruggs is arguably the fastest player in the league. I mean, Tyreek Hill might be the only other guy that can beat Henry Ruggs in a 40 or a 100-yard dash. And they put Lamar Jackson, not the NFL quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. I'm talking about a rookie cornerback,
That's right.
Lamar Jackson, for the New York Jets on Henry Ruggs. Left him on an island. This isn't Darrelle Revis. Like, Darrelle Revis is not with the Jets anymore, right? I don't. Jalen Ramsey. Yeah, it's like there are certain corners that you would leave on an island with any receiver. Lamar Jackson, I'm sorry, is not one of them. Like, he is going to be a good player, but he is a rookie and an undrafted rookie at that. And you still leave him on an island like that. It is. I mean, I don't. We saw this with your Cardinals a couple weeks ago with the last second Hail Mary situation, right? And even though they converted it because Kyler Murray threw a great pass and DeAndre Hopkins made an even better catch, the Buffalo Bills still had 4 or 5 receivers in the end zone, at least for an opportunity to knock the ball down. Like, Lamar Jackson got beat so bad that Henry Ruggs had time to slow up and actually had to come back to the ball because Lamar Jackson was so far behind the receiver at that point. I mean, if there was just one other safety that was over the top, there's a potential that safety could have at least swatted the ball down or made it a more difficult catch. I mean, I can't. There are no words to describe what Greg Williams did. I mean, here's the only thing I will say. I think the Jets really wanted to lose this game. Like, here's the thing. They wanted their young guys to play well, which they did. Like Sam Darnold, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, does have 1 interception, but led the team back. And obviously the Raiders had to have that miraculous comeback. But like, the Jets as a team probably played their most complete game. I think the owner might have called down and said, hey, like, we can't win this game. Like, we are screwing our chances of getting the number 1 overall pick and getting Trevor Lawrence. Like, do something to lose this game. That is the only thing I can think of as to why you would do a cover 0 blitz and leave your undrafted rookie corner one-on-one on an island with a first round drafted wide receiver, and like I said, arguably the fastest receiver in the league. Makes no sense.
Dick, it's exactly why I wanted you to explain it, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. I will say this. Excuse me. I will say this. Henry Ruggs made a great move on that play too. He didn't just run a seam. It's almost like he knew they'd run cover 0 and decided just to juke out the corner because he knew that one step and he's gone. Right? That's an underrated element of this play where I want to give credit to the receiver like we gave credit to DeAndre Hopkins. Right? Like, Hopkins in the Bills game realistically made that catch. And it was, again, a defensive call that the Bills weren't at the goal line and they were kind of forward a little bit and they had to go back and the receiver is going to make that catch all day. This is another example of a bad call and a receiver making a good play. So I wanted to give credit to Ruggs as well for changing up his route, whether or not that was on purpose, because that is actually realistically what caused this Hail Mary to be completed. He was so far off the corner because he made a little move. And again, you're talking about an undrafted corner. Might as well had the real Lamar Jackson out there covering because this guy had no chance. And, as far as I don't know what the hell happened to the Raiders, Jared, but I was singing their praises 2-3 weeks ago. And now, realistically, they've lost 3 games in a row because this was a loss in all intensive purposes. They just got lucky and won. So, man, I don't know what happened with the Raiders, but I do know what happened with the Jets. And that is they are still winless, and they are competing with the Jacksonville Jaguars every single week in the most competitive race in football for that last spot. And the Jaguars, they just keep blowing games too. What's funny about Jaguars too is they won the first game of the season and have lost every other. So Jets and Jaguars since week 1 since week 2 are winless. It's just insane. It's insane in the NFL this still happens. But
do they play each other this year? That'd be, we need to see a Jets Jaguars matchup. That sounds like a typical Thursday night, trying to get 2 teams that suck into the spotlight. We need to make that happen.
They do not, Jared. Maybe we could have one of these college football things where they just schedule each other. They're like,
here's the thing. We need to do that for Trevor Lawrence's sake so that he can sit back and watch these 2 teams and say, which one do I want to go to, right? Which situation would be better? Because he's going to go to one of the 2 teams. Sam Darnold, I'm sorry. Injuries, whether you can say what you want about the team not putting players around you enough, it just hasn't worked out. I think that he's going to get traded or released. And if you're the Jaguars, Gardner Minshew, your story was really cool. But if they have a chance to get Trevor Lawrence, they're taking him. So
I'll say this, Jared. I'll say this: the schedules are looking bleak for these 2 teams too. The Jets play the Seahawks, Rams, Browns, and Patriots. Have fun with that. And then let me see the Jaguars real quick. Where did my Jaguars link come up? Their schedule is hard too. This is a little computer.
AFC South.
That's a tough schedule. They play the Titans, Ravens, Bears, and Colts. So
I mean,
the Jets are getting that first pick.
Maybe? Yeah, that's getting the first pick. Yeah, that's getting the first pick.
Let's get into our review for Week 13. We're doing only 2 games today. Jared will do one in a second, and I'm going to start with this one. Titans, guys, and this is one of those times where I'm going to admit I was hella wrong with my pick the Titans, because when I started the day on Sunday, I said, you know what, this is an easy -4 Titans bet, right? Titans are going to win by 2 possessions or something like that, and we're going to be talking about how good the Titans are, and I'm going to be on this podcast talking to Jared about how he was wrong about the Titans and how, the Browns are frauds. Well, what happened was the Browns were up 65-0 in the first half in this game.
38-7. Yeah,
38-7. I mean, just essentially the same thing. And my Titans just didn't do anything. And I know the score was close, but there was a lot of BS that happened at the end of this game, and the Browns not carrying on defense. So this was the blowout in every, intensive purposes. What's funny about the Titans is it just seems like, Jared, maybe I'm realizing they are frauds. And I think it's not on the offensive end, it's on the defensive end. This team is just not as good as it was on defense as it was last year. And what's interesting is they have Mike Vrabel as the head coach. What's going on, right? How is your offense so good, and then your defense be so bad when you're a defensive coach? I don't understand that, and I think it's really the thing that's going to affect the Titans here if they're able to make the playoffs. It's a little different than last year. They had their run because their defense was better and their offense was the same. And now their offense might actually be a tiny bit better, and their defense is so much worse. So I think that's what I'm realizing about the Titans. As far as the Browns go, man, this reminds me, Jared, a lot of the Packers last year, but a little bit worse. You look at this record and they're 9-3, and you go, how the hell are the Browns 9-3? And it's because, they're finding ways to win games. It's similar to another AFC North team that we're going to talk about in a second that finds a way to win games, and their record probably isn't how good they are. This Browns team is running the football. They're playing good defense, and Baker Mayfield's doing enough. But I'm just telling you, Jared, they get into the playoffs and they play the Steelers and Chiefs. I don't know. I don't think they have any chance. And we're not going to get into pretenders and contenders about the Browns because they're not in first place and they don't have that right to be in pretenders or contenders. But they're pretenders. And at 9-3, they may end up the season 12-4, even 13-3. I'm still not giving them any chance to make the Super Bowl. And so, again, this is the definition of a fraud bowl, Jared. We called it out last week. And even though the Browns get a big win, I'm still I don't think they can beat the Chiefs. I don't think they can beat the Steelers. And they might not even be able to beat the Bills either. So this is an interesting game. What were your thoughts on this? Obviously, you were a little bit more correct about the Titans being frauds, but were you surprised at the Browns blowout here?
I was surprised at how well the Browns threw the ball offensively. Listen, Baker Mayfield, he shut up a lot of his haters in this game, right? The Browns are known to have a great running attack with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And obviously they lost Odell Beckham Jr. to a torn ACL weeks ago. And so you've got Jarvis Landry and a host of tight ends to go along with that running core. But Baker Mayfield came out and said, listen, I can throw the ball around too, even without my best weapon at receiver. So I want to give him credit, for coming out and slinging the ball around. And I believe it was when they were down on the goal line, they faked a run to Nick Chubb, and they ended up throwing it to one of the linemen, like the backup offensive lineman, right? So they're getting a little bit creative with their play calling and not just being simply vanilla. So I like what the Browns are doing offensively. And if Baker Mayfield can continue to play well, I don't expect him to throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns every single game. But if he can continue to look this good throwing the football, it is only going to help that run game, right? Because you go into a game against the Browns knowing that you have to stop the run. And typically, if you can stop the Browns running game, that Baker Mayfield will eventually make 1 or 2 mistakes, throwing a ball away on an interception. He didn't do that in this game. He protected the football and he made plays or gave his playmakers opportunities with the ball. So, good on them. We will see if they can continue this going forward, or if this was just a one-hit wonder and the Titans, just kind of wet the bed from a defensive standpoint. I do want to give the Titans a little bit of credit. Listen, last week, the Titans had like 150 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns by Derrick Henry in the first half against the Colts, who have one of the best defenses in the league, right? Coming into this game, it was literally like, oh my gosh, this is an old school smash mouth. Both teams can run the football. Both teams have good defenses type of game, right? Well, we obviously didn't really see that with the Titans because they were down by so much and they had to throw the ball to get themselves back in the game. I want to give a little bit of credit to Ryan Tannehill for kind of doing that same thing and showing that, hey, I can also throw the football and I'm not just a game manager. Ryan Tannehill had like 389 yards and 3 touchdowns, also with an interception. But still, I think Tannehill showed that, hey, we can be a little bit more of a balanced offense as well. And this isn't just about Derrick Henry. Now, we need to see that a little bit more when it's more of a close game and not like a blowout. And then I would have a little bit more confidence in Ryan Tannehill. But I think he also showed that when this team is clicking, that they can be a balanced offense. So, the Titans are frauds, but I was impressed by how they came back, because in reality, this should have been like a 41-10 game, right? We don't see Ryan Tannehill throw the ball all over the place. That's not what he really does. So the fact that he was able to do that, I'll give them a little bit of credit. Last thing I will say about the Cleveland Browns, this is the first season since 2007, Nick, that the Cleveland Browns will have a winning record to finish the season. 2007. Nick, you want to know the type of world that we lived in 2007? The first iPhone just was released in September.
Wow.
Right. So like we didn't even, the iPhones were a completely new thing to all of us. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor of California. Let's see. Instagram wasn't even a thing yet, right? Everyone was still messing around with Facebook and probably MySpace or whatever the heck you were doing back then, right? Bob Barker retired from The Price is Right. Just like random facts. Like the final edition of the Harry Potter book series came out. It's like 2007. It has been 13 years, going on 14 years, since the Cleveland Browns have had a winning record. Not even just a 500 record, a winning record to finish an entire NFL season. So, I mean, if you're a Browns fan, you got to like pop some champagne or something. I don't know. This is like a monumental moment for them. Don't you think?
No, it is. But again, celebrate your first win percentage or your first over 500 record.
Cleveland Browns, you do.
It's the only thing they're winning, Jared, this season. It's the only thing they're winning.
That's what I'm saying. They have to celebrate because it is the only thing they're going to win. I mean, come on,
Jay. You want to hear something crazy? That 2007 was a good year in Cleveland sports. That was the same year that LeBron brought the Cleveland Cavaliers, like that no-name team with like Mo Williams and all those guys, to the finals. That was a really good Cleveland year. So that's how long ago, guys. LeBron James was with the Cleveland Cavaliers in his first NBA Finals. The last time the Browns were had a winning record, not even in the playoffs. It's just craziness. All right, let's transition and talk about a really bad team here. And Jared, this is a really bad team that you don't like, so you're going to be happy to talk about this. That's the Philadelphia Eagles. And what we saw in this game, because the game was whatever, Packers blew out the Eagles, and then, a lucky punt return and all this other stuff ended up making the score close, like a lot of these other games. We got to see Jalen Hurts at quarterback, something that sort of was rumored the week before, and then Jalen Hurts really didn't play, and the Eagles lost again. And you wonder what the hell's going on. Why play Jalen Hurts 2 plays to throw screens when Carson Wentz is throwing the ball all over the place? So, Jared, Eagles, Packers, but the story here is Jalen Hurts plays. What did you see from him, and what should happen next?
Yeah, before I get into Jalen Hurts, really quick, I'm going to do something on this show that I don't do very often.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you credit. You called it at the beginning of the year.
Hell yeah.
And said, hey, just watch out for this. Just, you never know. Doug Peterson is on the hot seat. And listen, I think he's literally scrapping together, trying to do anything he can. And it's one of the reasons why he ended up putting Jalen Hurts in this game. But Doug Peterson might be out of a head coaching job at the end of the year. Now, not to say that he, isn't a qualified coach or won't land on his feet, but this situation in Philadelphia is a dumpster fire. Mm-hmm. And it's making my Dallas Cowboys just look better and better. So I absolutely love it. But no, in all seriousness, listen, Carson Wentz, that $128 million contract that he signed and received at the beginning of the 2019 season, I mean, that is looking like one of the, biggest mistakes that this team has made in recent memory. And I don't know if it's confidence. Obviously, yes, the Eagles have been depleted by injuries. Their offensive line is not what it used to be. They have, I believe, 2 or 3 guys, including their All-Pro right tackle Lane Johnson, who is out. Zach Ertz, the All-Pro tight end, has missed multiple games. He came back in this game, but he's clearly not 100% yet. Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson have been out. Jalen Reagor, the first-round draft pick wide receiver, has not lived up to the hype, at least so far. So it's not all on Carson Wentz. But when you are a $100 million, franchise quarterback, give you the keys to the Ferrari type of dude, you are supposed to overcome those injuries and the lack of talent around you. We saw Carson Wentz do it last year, right? And even though the NFC East was somewhat of a dumpster fire last year, Carson Wentz, with even less talent, was able to bring his team to an NFC East division title and into the playoffs. And so, he's kind of dealing with the same situation this year, and he's just not able to put it together. I mean, listen, before he got benched, Carson Wentz's stat line, 6 completions off 15 attempts, 79 yards, no touchdowns, 0 interceptions, sacked 4 times with a QBR of 37.2. It's just not going to get it done, right? And it's not like he was going up against a juggernaut Green Bay Packers defense. I mean, they get run on all over the place. Like, how do you not run the ball more with Miles Sanders? He's not a bruising running back, but he gets 10 carries for 31 yards. I mean, you like, if you're an Eagles whether you're Doug Peterson, the head coach, or an offensive coordinator, or anyone on that coaching staff, how do you not say, listen, we need to help our quarterback and run the football? Like, give Jalen Hurts the ball. They should have ran the ball 30 or 40 times in this game. They only ended up running it for a total of 25 times. Carson Wentz is obviously not playing well, but this coaching staff is not helping them out at all. And I don't know if they just want to get out of the situation, if they're just kind of tanking and saying, listen, there's nothing else we can do. And I just want to get out of here. Let's just get through the end of the season, because I don't know what else to say. Right. And then, let's back it up a little bit. Also, if you're Carson Wentz, I think this actually might be somewhat of a confidence issue, because when you are supposedly, the king of the castle, the $100 million quarterback, and you got the keys to the car, but then your organization goes out and in the second round of the NFL draft, they take a quarterback like that. I'm sorry, that happened. Yep. That, to my knowledge, has never happened after a team has given a guy a $100 million contract. Had they then the following offseason, the following draft, went and drafted a quarterback so high. If you want to draft a quarterback in the 5th, 6th, 7th round as a development guy, someone who will, be a backup to Carson Wentz, totally understandable. I get that 100%. But you take a second-round draft pick that could have been used on another wide receiver, could have been used on second-round draft picks in today's NFL, they play. They are expected to contribute and be a key contributor for the team. And they take a quarterback? I can see why Jalen Hurts' confidence is hurt a little bit. So, Hurts comes in the game and he gives him a little bit of a spark. He ends up throwing like a 30-yard touchdown pass. He threw a late interception as well, but listen, he's a rookie quarterback coming in for the first time, so I don't really blame him for that. But where do the Eagles go from here, Nick? I think this is the real question, right? Because Doug Peterson in his post-game press conference was very nonchalant in as far as, he did not name who was going to be the starting quarterback for the Eagles next week. And he said, I'm going to have to go back and look at the film and basically all the typical coaching stuff that a guy would say in a press conference. But Nick, who starts next week for the Eagles? Like, does Carson Wentz still deserve to get the start, or does Jalen Hurts say, hey guys, like, you bench Carson Wentz and you put me in, like, it's time for me to take over?
This interesting question, Jared. I've been thinking about it, last few days, ever since we discussed that this might be a topic on our podcast. And once I heard Jalen Hurts came into that game, I watched the highlights this morning again, and, I saw what Hurts did when he came in, and I saw how the game progressed. Here's the thing. If I'm the Eagles, I give Carson Wentz one more try. And that is because he is the franchise quarterback. You didn't invest a lot of money in him.
No, he was.
Oh, I love that.
He was.
This is such an interesting, weird scenario in Philly, because it doesn't seem like to happen like every single year to Carson Wentz. Even in the Super Bowl, now that was an injury, but in the Super Bowl, the backup quarterback came in and won the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl MVP. Like, clearly, you paid Carson Wentz all this money, but it's almost like you never trusted him to be the guy. It was a stupid decision in the first place. I get that they were dominant that one year, but it's just, with Wentz, though, here's the thing. I'm going to defend him a little bit, because I've definitely watched the last few Eagles games. They just played on national TV, and it just, what you end up doing, because you want to watch the other team. You watch them play the Seahawks, because I want the Seahawks to lose. And I want to see, it's whatever, two first place teams or whatever. And then you have them playing the Packers. Packers are a good team, right? I want to see the Packers play. And what I've noticed is, again, you mentioned the stat there. No interceptions, 4 sacks. It wasn't all Carson Wentz's fault. I agree with bringing in Jalen Hurts, but when Hurts came in, he didn't really do anything. And he had very vanilla defense to play against, a lot of wide open guys. Again, the only reason this game was close is essentially because of a punt return touchdown. So Hurts didn't do anything in this game necessarily to win the job over. I will say this, though. If Wentz goes out there and starts stinking the bed against the Saints, yes, they play the Saints this week, so it just doesn't stop for the Eagles. I think then have to make the decision of going with Jalen Hurts. Like for example, if they make the decision to go with Jalen Hurts, he's there for the rest of the year. And then you could have quarterback competition the next year if you want, because you're still paying Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts, so might as well have them both compete. But at this point, the team would also be very healthy at that point too. At this point, I think you give him one more chance. If he can play well against the Saints, potentially beat the Saints, they only have my Cardinals, the Cowboys, and Washington to play the rest of the season. So realistically, you can have Wentz play in those 3 games. And worst comes to worst, you lose them and you get a good draft pick, right? And you can draft more defense or more offensive line help or more offensive weapons. I think you give Wentz one more chance. He played hard against Seattle, gave him a really good chance to win, and got sacked 4 times and didn't turn the ball over in this last game. So it wasn't all Wentz's fault. It's a little bit of injuries. It's a little bit of play calling. It's a little bit of them playing awesome teams lately too. And so Hurts came in, didn't prove enough to me, but he did prove enough to get a chance next week if they blow it. And with 3 easy games, you can play any quarterback against my Cardinals, who have been crap in the bed lately, and Washington and Dallas are obviously beatable as well. That's at least my take on the quarterback issue.
I mean, one more chance. I mean, the dude's giving you 12 games. Like, what?
But you're
what
paying him like
$50
million a year.
Exactly. Like, you know what this dude is at this point. You don't need to see anything else. Here's the one thing I will say. No, here's the one thing I will say, and I can't find the quote. I was trying to look for it while you were talking. So don't quote me, but I'm kind of paraphrasing here. Last week in the post-game news conference, head coach Doug Peterson, when he was asked if Jalen Hurts would be the starter going into the game against the Packers, Doug Peterson said, something along the lines of, no, because, if we make the switch, that is in the sense, kind of giving up on the season or telling our team that we're not going in the right direction. So, like I said, I couldn't find the exact quote, but paraphrasing there. So if the Eagles do make that switch to Jalen Hurts, he is basically conceding that the season is over.
It is a stupid thing to say. It's such a stupid thing to say.
Right. So we just need to watch and see, because obviously going up against the Saints, who are a very good team, they might get Drew Brees back this week. And even if they don't, their offense is potent enough to go out and score points. And their defense is, one of the best defenses we've seen in the Saints history, right? We always think of the Saints as an offensive juggernaut, where their defense has finally come along, and they are very, very good. So, you're right. I think the only legitimate argument that you can make for starting Carson Wentz is the fact that they are going up against a very good defense, and you don't want to just throw your rookie quarterback, to the wolves. So I can see why they would start Carson Wentz this week because of that reason. But to me, it's not because they're trying to give him one more chance. I mean, the dude, you got paid $100 million, and you suck. You suck. Plain and simple, you suck. I don't want to hear like one more chance. You've had 12 games, and you've had the last 3 years to prove that you are good, and you suck.
It definitely seems like with Philly, I don't know about Hurts, but with Philly, you look at like the rest of the NFC East, how horrendous it is this year. You have feel-good story in Alex Smith, right? Like, that's probably teaching Dwayne Haskins under his wing. They're on the rise. Ron Rivera is a coach. Giants, freaking Colt McCoy this week, and Daniel Jones has been playing better and better every single week. And, of course, the Cowboys, they have their own quarterback dilemma, sort of, but Dak Prescott clearly is a great quarterback. So, and then you have the Eagles, where Wentz just every week just keeps piling it up, and it's definitely like a sign of not good things. And, Jared, I'll say this, when I made my prediction at the beginning of the year, I thought the Eagles would be like 7-9, 8-8, and this would be what we're talking about. No. Like, they might end up with like 4 wins this season. It really is bad, but I'll take it. I'll take my prediction being correct. All right, we need to get into pretenders or contenders. And Jared, in that game we're talking about with the Eagles, there was a contender or pretender. So we will start with this. What we're going to do, guys, is rapid fire. We actually are running pretty low on time already because we've already had some good football talk. And so we're going to go real quick. We're going to go through the first place teams in the eight first place teams in the NFL, and just tell you if they're pretender or contender, and really quickly explain why. And then we will go into our preview for next week. So we didn't actually outline who we wanted to do each, so I guess we'll just go back and forth and kind of. And so we'll just do one each there. We're not going to talk about both. We'll just do one each here on the podcast. So, Jared, I'll give you the first one. Green Bay Packers, pretender or contender?
Contender all day long. Aaron Rodgers, discount double check, having one of the best seasons of his career. I mean, he just seems completely locked in right now, in the second season with head coach Matt LaFleur in this offense. And he's getting his weapons back. Devontae Adams, proving why he's one of the best receivers in the league. Aaron Jones finally had a good game this past week. He had been kind of a little silent recently, but he's still a very good, versatile running back, and run the ball to the backfield, catch it. I will say I still think that the Packers need to surround Aaron Rodgers with some more weapons. Right? I've said this multiple times on this show. Going back to this draft where there was a plethora of wide receivers that you could have, drafted. The Packers did not draft one at all. So for some reason, like, they are allergic to bringing in wide receiver talent to help Aaron Rodgers, but he is still proving without, even though he has Devontae Adams, he doesn't really have a number two. So without multiple weapons, that he can still make guys better. So yeah, as long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy, this Green Bay Packers team is going to be a team to mess with.
Yeah, no, the one thing about them is their run defense, I think, is their one kind of problem now.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical about that.
But so that would be the one issue you'd look. But yeah, they're definitely a contender in my opinion too. All right, so I will do the New Orleans Saints, 10-2. They've won with two different quarterbacks this year. Guys, they got Drew Brees as their quarterback. They're a contender, okay? And they have one difficult game for the rest of the season. It's the Chiefs. That will say a lot. If they get blown out by the Chiefs or something like that, that definitely might sway my opinion on whether they're really a true contender. But you have Drew Brees. You're 10-2. You can win now with any quarterback, essentially. This is a contender, and I'd be hard-pressed to find really a major issue on this team besides maybe Drew Brees being a little injured in a playoff game or something like that going in, him not being fully healthy. But this is as much of a contender as the Packers you just mentioned, and as a lot of these good AFC teams as well. All right, moving on to the NFC West. Jared, we have a tie for first place, so I'll just try to do both teams really quickly. Rams and Seahawks are tied for first place in this division. One of the best divisions in football, like we've outlined this year. Pretender or contenders for both teams?
This division going into the season was arguably going to be one of the best, and it still is. But some teams have fallen off because of injury and other things. I'll start with the Rams, who technically are in first place right now. I'm going to say contender. Jared Goff is starting to play a little better. He had a bounce back game after kind of just crapping the bed last week. But listen, you got Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey on defense. Not even arguably, it is just a fact. The best players at their respective positions. Aaron Donald is probably, like, you could make an argument Aaron Donald's the best player in the entire NFL. And Jalen Ramsey locks down one half of the field by himself, right? So that defense is good. I will say I'm a little suspect if they have to go up against a kind of tough-nosed running football team. Just 2 weeks ago, when the San Francisco 49ers came into town, no Jimmy Garoppolo, no George Kittle, and the 49ers ran all over the Rams, right, and completely dominated them. So skeptical there, but I still like the Rams, and on paper I like what they are. So I'm going to say contender. The Seahawks, I'm going to say pretender. A couple weeks ago I wouldn't have said this, but listen, since week 7, I believe, Russell Wilson leads the NFL in turnovers, right? I mean, the first 6 weeks of the season, Russell Wilson didn't have a turnover. He had like 13 or 14 touchdowns and 0 interceptions and 0 fumbles. And since then, He now leads the league in turnovers. So I don't know, why he is trying to like overcompensate and do more than he should, right? Like, he has weapons on the outside with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Obviously, he gets his running back Chris Carson back now, healthy. So for some reason, he's trying to do too much, and obviously it's not working out because they obviously had a bad loss to the woolly Giants, and Nick, you're going to talk about the Giants in just a minute here, but the Seahawks are kind of trending in the wrong direction right now. Russell Wilson is still great, and as long as he is healthy, we've seen what he can do as far as leading a team by himself. But the fact that he is turning the ball over right now, and his Seahawks defense is on pace to statistically have the worst defense in NFL history as far as passing yards go, shows me that they can't be trusted, right? They may be able to put up points, but they ain't going to stop anybody, right? So for that, I'm going to say Pretenders. And this division right now, it looks like it's the Rams for the taking.
Yeah, I'll say this, Jared. I have to disagree on the Rams. I think they're Pretenders as well. And the only reason I'm talking in this segment is because I have the NFC East next, and we all know that they're not Contenders. So I'm just going to start talking about this one because it's also my division, right? I agree with you wholeheartedly on everything you said about the Seahawks. You can't have a last-place defense win a Super Bowl. It's impossible. For us to say that means might as well just never talk about the NFL again if we predict that. The Rams, I don't think with Jared Goff as their quarterback, Jared, especially when they already have lost a Super Bowl with Jared Goff, that you can say in this year where he's playing worse, that they're a contender. I just think this guy against good teams just does not play well. And also, anytime he's pressured, anytime he's out of the pot, it just, if this guy essentially doesn't have wide open receivers that are created by Sean McVay, they're not successful. So I have to disagree with you on the Rams. I have to disagree with you on the entire NFC West, which is crazy. Both are Pretenders, in my opinion, which is something I would not have said 2-3 weeks ago. But, you know, my Cardinals are Pretenders. The 49ers are unfortunately Pretenders because of the injury. And you have the Seahawks and Rams, who I just think they're not better than the top two teams, you know, realistically in both the AFC and NFC. So I can't call them Pretenders. I just said NFC East. Obviously, you have the Washington and New York tied for first place. Guys, come on. I know the Giants beat the Seahawks, but like to defend also the Seahawks a little bit on Russell Wilson's turnover rate. Not that I said I'm going to change it to Contenders, but both those interceptions last week were balls that were dropped by the receiver, like went through their hands and went into a defender. So I don't blame him for those two interceptions last week, and they should have won if that stuff. But again, Giants and Washington, no. Washington beat the Steelers, cool, but that doesn't matter. Like they're not a contender and they're not winning the Super Bowl. To get to the Steelers really quickly, because they are the new contender here. They're contenders, Jared, but they're definitely not a true 11-1 team. They definitely have squeaked out a lot of wins. They have let teams back into games. I can give you credit for winning football games, but there was a reason there were social media accounts calling them fraud, undefeated teams a week or two ago. Because this team, it was inevitable that they were going to lose a game like this. And they lost the game last night. They had that game won, and for some reason, the Steelers just can't hold on to leads. And come the playoffs, it's going to be difficult. But there's one thing that makes them a contender, and that is their defense. And defense wins championships. And in the playoffs, defense, if you have a great defense like the Steelers have, you end up winning those games. So they're a contender, but they are definitely not a true like 11-1 team compared to another 11-1 team that I will switch to you, Jared. That is the Chiefs.
Oh, I mean, this is probably the easiest pick of them all, right? The other team, along with the New Orleans Saints in the NFC, who have so far clinched playoff spots, not divisions, just playoff spots. I mean, do I need Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, throw in Le'Veon Bell, right? Do I need head coach Andy Reid?
No, you're good, Jared. You're good.
Do I need to say any more?
We probably didn't even need to mention their name because I think everybody believes they're contenders. Now, I'll ask you this, Jared. Best team in the NFL?
Yeah. Over the Saints. It's not a landslide, but yeah, I'll take them over.
Yeah. No, there you go. All right, so and I will take the Colts and Titans. I discussed this division I think 2 weeks ago when I was talking about. I said the Colts were going to lose 3 games in a row. They squeaked out a win against the Texans, so I was wrong about that. The Titans blew it against the Browns. These are not contenders. I know the Titans had a playoff run last year. But again, I outlined earlier in this podcast, their defense isn't good enough this year. Their offense is playing well, but they're limited. When Derrick Henry doesn't play well, you don't win. Their receivers are actually playing great this year. Like Corey Davis had a great game this week. A.J. Brown's been a monster ever since he came off the injury. their defense, I believe, in these big games against like the Chiefs or the Steelers or even the Bills, it might not be enough to win those games. So I can't call them a contender, and even less the Colts. You know, they have a good defense, they have a good offensive line, but they got Phillip Rivers at quarterback. And I just can't confidently say that the Colts with Phillip Rivers is a contender. I outlined 2 weeks ago. You can go back and look at that podcast. Why I explained a little bit why the Colts are pretenders in this division and in the AFC. I just think when you look at the Chiefs and the Steelers and the Bills, what Jared is going to talk about in a second, it's just not close. Like it's not enough. And I just think both these teams are pretenders. So Jared, take it away with the Bills, and then we'll move on to our quick previews of the next week's games.
Yeah, no doubt contenders. And we saw them on Monday Night Football yesterday against, like I said, you know, even though an injury-plagued 49er team, still a very good and tough-minded 49ers team, right? The Buffalo Bills showed that not only from an offensive standpoint can they keep up, but defensively they are hard-nosed as well, right? That defense will travel anywhere, anytime, any place. And you pair that with the fact that their quarterback, Josh Allen, is continuing to evolve and get better every single year, right? He came into the league being able to throw the ball, 100 yards on his knees, right? He's got all the arm strength and all that in the world. It was his accuracy that needed to improve, and we've seen that so far. Cole Beasley had 100 yards in the first quarter, in the first half, and he's not even their best receiver. That would be Stephon Diggs, right? So I think they have a great balance with their offense and their defense. Miami is right behind them, and Buffalo has a tough matchup on Sunday night against those Steelers that we just talked about. But, obviously this is not New England's division anymore, and I think this is Buffalo's to lose.
It's very interesting. Now, Jared, you just discussed the game, and this actually goes right into our preview. It works out perfectly. Week 14, Bills and Steelers, Sunday Night Football. What do you think? Does this also potentially make confirm if the Bills are a contender or pretender realistically?
No. I think the Bills are contenders, regardless of what happens. Like, unless they completely get destroyed and blown out, which the Steelers do not do. They don't blow out teams. They win games, but they're typically ugly, close type of wins. And I can see this game being the same thing. Unless something like that were to happen, no. The Bills, no matter what, are still contenders, and they have proven that throughout their consistent play throughout the year.
Absolutely. Now getting to this game a little bit, what do you think does happen? You have a great Monday night win for Buffalo, and the Steelers have a bad Monday night loss against the Washington. What do you think happens in this game? It is technically the game of the week next week. So what's your opinion on this?
So, my initial thought is to kind of jump on that Bills bandwagon, right? And obviously they're coming off of a good win, like we said. Josh Allen playing very well, defense playing well. There are a multitude of reasons why the Buffalo Bills should be favored in this game. But it's something about the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? And you mentioned it as well when you were talking about them. The last couple of games have been kind of up and down, right? And obviously they lose yesterday to the Redskins, who are not a good team, even though they're tied for first place. Even going back to, I believe it was like a month ago when they played my Cowboys without Prescott, and that should have been a blowout, and the Cowboys made it a game, right? So yeah. Pittsburgh, for the last month or so, they haven't, I don't know what it is, but they haven't been playing with as much confidence, and they've kind of lost some of that swagger that they had at the beginning of the year. I think we saw in last week's post-game press conference and even yesterday's, Mike Tomlin's kind of fed up. He said it last week. I believe he called his team like a JV team. He basically said, we're not playing well enough. He's like, I don't care that we won the game. It's how we play. And obviously Pittsburgh, the players did not respond to that criticism. So I would love to be a fly on the wall, but I would not want to be a player going into this week's meetings and camp, because I think Mike Tomlin's pissed. He could care less about an undefeated season, and I think he could care less that his team is actually 11-1. He knows that this team is not playing well. So I'm really interested to see, if the type of mindset that the Steelers come out with this week, and I hope they have a big chip on their shoulder. Right, they should be upset that they lost to the lonely Redskins, or I'm sorry, the lonely Washington football team. They should be upset, right? And going up against a very good opponent, that should be all the motivation they need. So, I want to go with Buffalo because I think right now they're just playing better and they're the better team. But Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin with a chip on their shoulder, if he can get his players, focused, I don't know, man. You'll have to come back to me later on in the week because I don't know if I can make a decision right now. It's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, Jared, you got to love that the Steelers are, their coach or doesn't believe that they're as legitimate as they are, right? You got to love that as well. And yeah, it's a really interesting matchup, and I'm kind of with you on that. I don't know who to pick in this game yet. It's a good Sunday night football game. I love that we have a good Sunday night football game. Moving on, you mentioned the Dolphins a little bit earlier when you talked about the Bills. They play the Chiefs this weekend, and so Dolphins at 8-4. We know the Chiefs and stuff. This game is actually almost mirrors the Steelers Bills game because you have the Bills at 9-3. If they lose and Dolphins win, you have a tie for first place in the AFC East. And if both, if the Chiefs win, the Steelers win, or vice versa, they're battling for that number one seed, which is really, really important this year. So this is just as important of a game. I think you have Tua and you have this Dolphins team that's really rejuvenated this year and really playing well against the juggernaut in the NFL. I'll say this too, Jared. The Dolphins also, they play Kansas City this week, New England the week after that, Vegas, and Buffalo to end the season. So they have a tough schedule, and this is almost a must-win for the Dolphins if they want to win the division. They'll probably end up making the playoffs, but if they want to win the division, it's going to be they have to win a game like this. What are your thoughts on this Dolphins Chiefs game as well?
For the Dolphins, I think we're gonna find out a lot about them, right? And I don't think they need to go undefeated in these last 4 games. But if they can stay competitive in these games and maybe go 2-2, potentially 3-1, the Dolphins are like really for real, right? I've got them obviously as a wild card team right now, but this is when the Dolphins really show who they are. In with the Dolphins. But I think right now, no doubt, they're wild card team.
Judgment Day in the AFC East this week, Jared, is Judgment Day. Should be interesting. We are running low on the podcast here, so I'm just going to pose a couple questions about the college football rankings to Jared here that I wanted to ask him. But I tend to watch a lot of college football. I don't have work Saturdays, so I'm able to watch a lot of the games and a lot more than I have in the past. So I want to get to these college football rankings really quickly and just ask you a few questions, Jared. So obviously, to go over them, you have Alabama at number 1, Notre Dame number 2, Ohio State number 3, Clemson number 4. They will release new rankings today, but I believe those 4 teams will relatively stay the same. You then have Texas A&M, Florida with 1 loss at 5-6, Cincinnati 8-0, one of those non-Power 5 teams at number 7, and Indiana 6-1. So my first question to you, Jared, is what is the difference between Texas A&M, Florida, and Indiana, and why is Indiana getting punished for just playing less games? Why are they not in the mix and maybe number 5 here?
I think it's just because we don't think of Indiana as a football team. Like
so,
the Hoosiers,
I know,
they play basketball, man. Like they're not supposed to be good at football, right? And then they come in and they compete a couple weeks ago with Ohio State at Ohio State, and they almost have a comeback win, right? It wasn't even the fact that they lost. And the head coach in the locker room at the end, he was telling his players, he was fired up. He was like, hey, keep your heads high. Like we did not, lose this game, right? We showed that we can compete with the best of the best. So I think for these people making the rankings, it's just like they're not used to seeing Indiana football be so good, right? And it's just kind of a shock. But no, in all seriousness, I think it really has to do with the fact that they've just played less games, and Texas A&M and Florida are in the SEC. Now, listen, when you talk about the Aggies right now, their 1 loss was somewhat of a blowout loss to Alabama, who is no doubt the best team in all of college football. But then they come back the next week and they beat number 4 Florida. So, they have a bad loss and then they come back and rebound and show that, hey, we are still a good team. And so, Jimbo Fisher's got that team rolling, and I think the Aggies deserve to be there at number 5. Florida, I think, is Trask right now should be the league leader and the vote getter, lead vote getter. I'm sorry for the Heisman. And they're, like I said, their only loss was to Texas A&M, and it was only by 3 points. So it's not like they got blown out either. So I think Indiana is right where they should be. If Indiana had played a couple more games in their schedule, if the Big Ten wasn't a bunch of losers, and if they were able to start their season clear, I think we would have had, more of a sample size to look at Indiana. But it's just not their fault. But because they've played less games, I think they're right where they need to be, sitting at number 7, which I think is, a shock in itself. Like I said, for a university that is known for basketball, and I can't even tell you the last time that Indiana football was relevant.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because the only reason I bring it up is because Indiana, they obviously had the 1 touchdown loss to Ohio State. And Ohio State, we consider one of the top teams in college football. Then this week, they beat Wisconsin with a backup quarterback. So it seems like this team even has depth, and maybe was just unrecognized by the College Football Committee. Hopefully, we have Florida and Texas A&M lose, and maybe Indiana can have that chance. Also, I'll say this. Interesting note, Ohio State has to play 5 games to be able to be eligible for the Big Ten Championship. Indiana might actually have that chance at the Big Ten Championship if this Michigan-Ohio State game for some reason gets canceled. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Ohio State, they're 5-0. Ohio State's 5-0, so they played 5 games.
5-0? Maybe it's 6 games. I know they have to play this. They have to play this game. Indiana has already played 7 games. They have to play this game in order to be eligible. I think regardless, Ohio State gets in because they beat Indiana, but just interesting though there. And then one last question. We got to end the podcast. Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati. Do they have a chance? They're both undefeated.
Nah. Listen, if this is March Madness, right? If we're talking about college basketball, March Madness, 64-team tournament, Coastal Carolina, they're Cinderella sweetheart. I'm pinning them in all day long. But this is college football, and I'm not even going to put Coastal Carolina in the same breath as a Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame. Sorry. I know you wanted to get a different reaction out of me, but it's not going to happen.
We'll talk more college football next week. We do have to go on this podcast. Football friendly today. NFL, Pretenders and Contenders, lots to talk about there. And then also we will get into the college football rankings. Next week, we'll be previewing a lot of those championship games where we'll have answers to a lot of what we're talking about now. But for this podcast, we are finished. I am Nenad.
Jared Smith.
And we will see you next week with more football. See you guys.